Have you ever sent someone a text and before they answered you, it just sat there? And at first, when you sent it, it was just a text. Then hour goes by, and then maybe two go by. And then all of a sudden, you have concocted a story in your mind that is playing because they never answered the text. Welcome to Big Talk at the Table. I'm Joni Leigh, and I am so glad to have you here today. I am sitting across the table today with my good friend, Bonita Jacque. And Bonita, I am glad you're here for this conversation today because we're talking about something every single one of us has done. We feel something and we attach a story to it. And so I talked before the intro really quick about an unanswered text. And I know there are so many out there who know exactly what I'm talking about. You send a text and you're waiting and you're waiting. And at first it was just a text. And then all of a sudden, all these things started like swirling through your mind. These emotions started coming in. And then you started telling yourself a whole story about this text, which might have been like, they don't care about me anymore. Maybe I did something that offended them. What happened? Are they mad at me? Then you start feeling anxious. You start feeling rejected and you start feeling all the things. So you had prepared yourself a conversation in your mind that probably a story, I should say, that probably had never happened because the friend calls you in like 2 days and says, "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry I didn't reply to your text. I was super busy at work. I was helping my mom do this and I completely slipped my mind." And you're just sitting there thinking, I wasted all this time and all of this energy and all of these things making up a story that never existed. Today, we are part 2 of our series, The Biggest Lie We Tell Ourselves. Are your feelings telling you the truth? So welcome.
Thank you for having me back today.
Oh no. Welcome, Bonita.
I am so excited.
Come on,
to be
baby.
here.
You got to show me you're excited.
I am so excited to be here, to be on this discussion, because we have all been there at least 500 times.
If at least not 500 times. It's all of these lies that sit underneath these emotions and even the emotions themselves. That's what we're going to talk about today. So when I say the emotion is real, it's real. I don't want to discredit that at all. But the story that we build underneath that emotion is not true most of the time. Where do you think women get so stuck?
Well, we felt it. We created a story. Our body chemistry took over. This doesn't mean that your story's true, but your emotion is, is what you're really feeling. Your thoughts took over and they run amok. So the story begets the feeling, which then begets another story, which then begets another feeling. And so we just go deeper and deeper into it. And then we pull up other instances of the same exact thing, different players maybe, but it just keeps snowballing and we don't know how to stop it. And so now we think we're a terrible person, we're unlovable, somebody's mad at us. It's just this cascade of emotions and stories gets mixed up and we just don't know how to get ourselves out of it.
So we're going to try and help you do that today. We're going to try and help you not go down the rabbit hole. We're going to try and help you talk about emotions, name emotions. And I don't want to shame emotions. That's not what this episode is about. I think that so many of us are so used to having to stuff emotions away. And I don't want to do that. I actually want to bring them to the surface and talk about them so that we can recognize them more. Because when you're just stuffing them away and saying like, it doesn't matter, you're not dealing with really what is happening or is going to make you have a better outcome than what's happening right now. Because I lived in this, this text message at the beginning of this, I've been that girl. I've been that girl so many times and I've equated to exact what you said. I went down a rabbit hole, which was, I'm no good. I'm not this. They must not like me. What did I do to make them mad at me? And I think a lot of us women can relate to that for sure. But our emotions do matter. Our feelings do matter. And I want to give them ample room at the table, but I just want them to live where they're supposed to live and not in the stories that we tell ourselves.
Yeah, our feelings are meant to be a compass, but they don't define you. So they show us things we need to look at.
So when you say a compass, describe that to me.
It shows us, it's pointing the direction. Okay, you need to look at that. Do you really think you're unlovable? This has been like your best friend for 40 years. Do you really think she's all of a sudden turned on a dime and doesn't like you anymore? We can't even make that leap when we're stuck in those emotions to realize, like, well, that was kind of over the top, but we
Right.
can't see that.
So we could feel of being afraid, but maybe not being in danger. Is that what you
Right.
mean by a compass? Like I could feel.
Yeah, instead of pointing east and west and north and south, it's pointing us to anger and fear and resentment and embarrassment. Where do you need to look?
If we don't slow down the emotion, so the feeling and the story, because that's what happens. You get a feeling or you get an emotion, then you tell the story. So if we don't slow that down, that's where the story takes over and we start living from a conclusion that was never true to begin with.
Exactly.
So then there's a pattern. There's a pattern that happens. We give something meaning, and that meaning creates an emotion, and that emotion drives a reaction, usually. And then our reaction often creates more evidence from our story. And it's just over and over and over again. So if we go back to the text message that I talked about, the event was simple. They just didn't answer the text. That was super simple. The story that I created was they must be upset with me. That's why they're not responding. The emotion I felt was rejection. And then the reaction was I got defensive. I spiraled down the rabbit hole. And then when they finally did text me back or call, I was already acting different because that emotion had told me a story that then wanted me to be defensive or act that way. I was guarded. I guess that's maybe a better word. And so I felt something was wrong. So that's how I would have reacted to it. And why do you think the story can feel so convincing to yourself at the moment when it's happening?
Well, because you're setting in all of those emotions and you can't see beyond your sight here. You can't think outside of that because you've got this chemical cascade going on in your body. It's like the long line of dominoes and you clicked one over and there you go. There you're off on a tangent of, bashing yourself.
So when we go back to the text message, it's not just a thought anymore because as they don't respond, other things are happening. I'm telling myself this story, which you guys just heard, but also something else is happening in me. My chest is getting a little tighter. I'm having some anxiety. My stomach starts maybe getting upset because I'm telling myself, maybe they're mad at me. Why are they mad at me? Maybe they don't like me anymore. Now I can't go to sleep tonight because they didn't text me back. And all these thoughts are running through my head. So now I'm going to lose sleep. My stomach's upset and my chest is all tight from anxiety. So what happens to the body when we start believing these stories that we're making up?
Well, that's a really great question, Joni, because when we have something that's affecting us that way, we're releasing adrenaline. It's that fight or flight. So your body is producing all of this hormone, getting you ready to either pounce on something or to run away. And those chemicals, that adrenaline is just taking us sky high. It is going to raise our blood pressure, affect our digestion, affect our breathing, affect our sleep, affects everything because you're on heightened alert. And so, it takes time for that adrenaline to leave your body. It takes about 2 to 3 minutes if you had no other story and thoughts coming up. It takes 2 to 3 minutes. And then after 2 to 3 minutes, another half of it's gone. And so it, paces itself down. But when we're setting in it, it keeps continuing. And so we're just pulling in more and it's going to last a lot longer.
What you're saying is the more I add onto the story and I'm not sitting with it, the more I'm adding on, that's adding on more of that adrenaline, which is going to take that much longer for it to get out of my body.
Exactly. Totally. Yep. It sure is. It's going to run your life for a while and your health.
I mean, it affects you, not just your mind, it affects your body also, like your physical state. And I know I've lost sleep over it because of something that maybe wasn't resolved in that day. I didn't hear back from them. And now it went to the next day. That's that unresolved. What did I do? because that's what you're telling yourself, really makes for your body to be, sometimes it interrupts people going to work. They're not able to do their daily functions because they have anxiety so much over something as a story that they've concocted, basically. I looked up something and it's called, there's a name called cognitive behavioral therapy. So emotional reasoning. And it simply means we assume something is true, so we feel that it's true. And then your body starts believing that it's true. So if I feel rejected, which at the text, you didn't text me back, Bonita, thanks a lot. So I felt rejected. And so I must be unwanted immediately. That's like what your brain goes to. That's your reasoning. Or if I was afraid, it must be because I'm not ready. And so I also found something interesting was in this research it's called affect labeling, which means putting feelings into words. So in plain language, when we name what we feel, it can help the brain move from reaction towards reflection. So sometimes the first step is not fixing the emotion, it's naming it. Sometimes one unanswered text is just one unanswered text, but maybe it's happened to you over and over again. And so it's just not that one answered text that you're dealing with. It's some things that maybe is repeated behavior or repeated pattern for you that can cause you to act and feel that way about something maybe that has happened that's older, that's an older memory. So like rejection, abandonment, not mattering. Can the body respond to an old wound as if it's happening in real time?
Absolutely. The body does not know if it's a current event or if it's a memory of a past event. The chemical release is exactly the same. And so it does take you a while to be able to pull yourself, into the present and say, is this happening now? And it's a tough thing because there's traumas that come up that we've had in the past, and we can, get to that trauma just like that. But we have to stop and say, okay, I'm safe now. It's not the same, but we have to be aware.
And we talked a little bit before we went on camera, and you had told me about something that you do by naming it. And I don't mean naming it as anger's anger, fear's fear. Tell me about that.
Well, I think you just want to know, what is it I'm feeling? What triggered that in me? Have I done that before? Is this a pattern? And maybe you can't do all of that in that moment, but when you give yourself some grace and, take a look at what the things are that bother you.
And so, have you noticed when you're in that moment? So the body can respond as an old wound. What's an example of something that somebody can do maybe as if to recognize that it is an old wound, that maybe it's not what's happening right now?
I think you'd want to say, have I experienced this before? Might be a great question. And if you could give it a name, I am feeling, not just say it's anger. It's like, I am feeling this anger. Don't call it my anger. I am feeling this anger. And I guess ask what does that have to show you? Can you name it? Let it move through you. Don't hang on to it and have to have that adrenaline keep flowing through you. But can you name it? Can you move through it? Can you let it go? Can you breathe through it? Do some tapping, anything you can do to get yourself out of that cycle. But it takes a lot of awareness to be able to say, maybe that's not really what it's all about.
I
Something
think
else.
changes when a woman changes the way that they tell this is like from saying I feel rejected to I am rejected. So
Right.
what do you think happens when they change their narrative and when they change that speech to themselves?
Well, it definitely goes more personal, as instead of saying I feel this way, but I am, you are not a lot of those things. And you need to realize that it's a feeling. It may not be true, but you're taking it on as if you own it, and you don't have to own these things.
Sometimes we name emotions, but we don't name it honestly. And I wanted to talk about this on levels of feelings because that's what we're talking about right now. So, like, we call it anger because anger feels stronger than being hurt. So we layer this, correct? And
I have the text message thing going on, and you did not respond to me. And I was very hurt. And then I thought, she does that all the time. Okay. And now I'm resentful and I'm angry and I can't sort them out because they're all swirling around at the same time. And okay, so now what am I feeling besides anger, resentment? I feel like I'm unloved. Now I'm feeling despair. And so we can just keep going, but we've got to stop it somehow and realize that it started with one thing and we've storied it into a multitude of harshness in our life that's not even true.
And so I read this and I really liked this. Naming the emotion matters because the name points to the need. And I thought this was really interesting. If I call it anger, I may attack. If I call it hurt, I may ask for a cure. If I call it stress, I may keep pushing. If I name it overwhelm, I may ask for help.
That's great.
So I thought that was really, really good. It's why naming it matters, it says. So you are in the emotion, but you're also understanding what it's trying to show you. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
It is, because it's the compass. It's showing you something.
Right,
But we
right.
don't often can't get there to see what that means.
We often can't get there. You are absolutely right. And I think a lot of it is because we want to react immediately. I've noticed that this has been something huge that I've been working on in my own life because I'm telling you, that example at the beginning was a lived experience of mine. And I would come back with the knee jerk reaction almost immediately. And it's all of the things that you just said. And example that you just gave a minute ago, I was like, have you been in my brain? Because that's exactly what I would do and what would happen.
We've all been there, Joni. We've all been there. We've all had those text messages or emails or phone calls that tell us, well, I don't matter. And, we all have a core wound where it's very sore when we poke it. And, we get poked a lot. And so you also have to be aware of, of that, of, well, this happened before. That's not what the story was. She wasn't ignoring me. She had to do something else. Her phone died. It wasn't charged, whatever. We need to take a step back and realize there could be other explanations. So when a feeling gets really loud and that story feels true, how do you bring yourself back to the table instead of letting that emotion take over and lead?
So this was something I really had to work on because like I just told you, I was the reaction. I was the one that went down the rabbit hole. I would go so far down, I couldn't see the light anymore at the top. So I created a framework, which is called pause at the table. And that's really the first word of it is so important because I think instead of reacting, if we paused and followed this framework, we would be able to do exactly what you've been telling us to do, but in a sort of organized fashion that makes some sense. Because if you do an action over and over again, it's just going to become part of your behavior. So the beginning, I don't think you're going to be able to do all of these things that we're saying as examples. But if we kind of put it into a framework for you, it might help you a little bit in doing that. So when your emotion gets loud and it wants to take over your whole conversation, I think that it deserves to be honest. I feel like you need to be honest with it, be honest with the emotion that you're having. I think that is, but that's where the pause has to happen. Once the honesty is, then the pause has to happen. I believe that it deserves compassion. I believe it deserves attention, but also it needs a framework. And so it's called Pause at the Table. And basically what it does is I want you to tell the whole truth. So I wrote this framework first with tell the truth. And then I scratched that out and I went, tell the whole truth, because the lie is the story that we tell. But we really got to tell the whole truth right up front about what I'm feeling, what story am I telling myself, what conclusion am I reaching? And then this is where the lie usually hides. So if you tell the whole truth, you're going to get the lie out of that, right? And then the second is I call lead with love. So basically, what would love say? What would love say to you? Because you're answering from the lie version of whatever it is that you're going down the rabbit hole. So let's flip that narrative. What would love say to you with whatever feeling? And then choose your higher purpose. what response moves you towards being the person and the woman that God created you to be? And that doesn't always, your strongest emotion doesn't always point to that. And then 4 is open to infinite possibilities. And that is the one that a lot of times you may not make it from 1 to 4 in a couple minutes. It might take you a little while to get there, depending on what emotion you're dealing with. But what possibility could I see because this emotion is so loud? And then what emotions can narrow a vision? And then truth opens up the door back again for possibilities. So I wanted to practice this with you with the text story that I gave. So let's go back to the unanswered text. I felt rejected. That was the emotion. So the story I was telling myself is that you, Bonita, didn't text me back, so you're upset with me. You're pulling away from me. You don't care as much about me as I thought you did. I went on the road and you don't want to talk to me anymore. And so the conclusion I got from all of that was I just don't matter. Now, if I paused at the table, I would say, love would say that that isn't true. And love might also say that the silent hurts, but you don't have all the facts. So what response moves me towards the woman God created me to become? Maybe waiting before I reacted. Maybe taking that pause and then asking a clearer question instead of creating a whole argument in my head. Maybe I refuse to punish you because the story that I created isn't going to check out. What possibility could I see because of something that you have not told me yet? So the silence is not rejection. Maybe it's just silence. So, and that's where the pause happens. And then truth gets a chance to speak, which if we're going down that old spiral of the old habits, that doesn't ever happen, right? Truth doesn't get us a chance to speak.
Right.
So I think a lot of people would say they understand, they felt like this, but the thought keeps spiraling, and the feelings keep coming back. How do we interpret the cycle when the same thought and feeling and the story just keeps repeating?
First off, we need to realize that it is a cycle. We've been there before. Then maybe we can figure out how we need to think about it that way of, well, this seems to be a story that I have a lot. So I need to look at that and see what I can glean from that about where it starts and what it means to me or how I'm taking it. And did that really happen? The last time, was that really true that, that Joni doesn't feel loved anymore? Well, no, I love Joni. So, that's not true. So it's really getting curious and doing some investigation and some deep questions for yourself of, okay, well, this keeps coming around and I keep acting the same way and it's not getting any change. So where am I figuring in there that maybe I can do something different or realize something different?
Oh, I think that when I think about emotions, I started thinking about what really emotions had been really loud for me lately. And I can think that a lot of ones that came to my mind instantly were fear, disappointment, some grief. I've had quite a bit of grief in the last probably month and a half to 2 months, and maybe loneliness. And I wanted to kind of talk about loneliness just for a minute, just because I think a lot of people don't maybe categorize that as an emotion. And I think it's a real, true emotion that we have.
I think loneliness to me, what popped into my head was I feel forlorn. There's nobody there for me. I don't count. Nobody loves me. And that's a rabbit hole of itself.
Mm-hmm. And so one of the emotions, ones that I tested this framework was loneliness. And I just wanted to read you when I put it through the 4-part framework. I want to tell you what it said. The feeling is I feel lonely, right? The story that we tell ourselves is no one really sees me. Everybody already has all their people. The conclusion is that you get, I'm forgotten and I'll always be alone. That's the story, that loneliness kind of creates, right? So lead with love is feeling lonely doesn't mean you're unloved. You're worth reaching connection, even if it feels awkward. And I've reached that point where I know that being lonely or being alone just has a different meaning in my life right now. But I love reaching a connection with other people. So I use this one a lot with Lead with Love. Choose the higher purpose is don't let loneliness convince you to disappear. I think that creates in its own, you want to just be by myself. I want to shut the door. And ways that you can get to there is send an honest text to somebody, pull up a chair with somebody, create a connection with somebody to get yourself out of that I just want to be by myself. And then open it to infinite possibilities is maybe connection begins with one brave reach. So, a lot of people that are lonely are waiting for somebody else to like take their hand. And maybe it's the other way around. Maybe it's for you to open up a door, or you to open out a reach instead of always waiting for it to happen, for somebody to open the door for you. So that's how the framework went for me around loneliness. Do you have anything to add to that?
I think, we don't know somebody else is lonely because we're so busy with our lives. And so if someone were to reach out and say, hey, I miss you, or, I could really use a friend, it's like, I'd be all over that. But
I,
when we're sitting there, doing all the things that we have to do on a daily basis, we're focused on ourselves. And it's not that we don't care, right? It's just that we've got our stuff. But if I knew that you had stuff, I would be happy to help you. I would be happy to go out to coffee or lunch or Diet Coke, even though I'm not going to drink it. But, whatever it is. So,
right.
don't be afraid to reach out and let somebody know how you're feeling, because there are people out there that will jump in to help you.
And I would agree. And I think that that is something as women we need to get better about doing and not judging others. Or again, the lie that we tell ourselves is if I ask for help, people are going to think I'm weak. If I tell somebody I need to go to coffee with them just because I need another human being, maybe just to talk to, somebody's going to think I'm weak. And that is so not the truth. And so I think as women, we just need to get better about, doing that and opening ourselves up instead of reclusing all these feelings that we have because we are fearful of what someone else is going to think about us.
I mean, if you're feeling sad and, just my connection with you will help, then we need to do that. As a matter of fact, I messaged a friend that I hadn't heard from in a while, and said, hey, we should do coffee soon. And then I was kind of waiting for her to, say, well, she did say, yeah, that's great. We should.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? A lot of times too, I'm going to take you one step farther than that because that's always an invitation of we should do it soon and nothing gets put on the calendar. And I really would challenge you to be like, hey, you want to go to coffee next week on Tuesday? Even if they can't go, they'll usually say Tuesday's not good for me, but Thursday, what about Thursday? And so it kind of nails it down instead of leaving this like open-ended, date of some time because you just said it. We're all so busy that sometimes never happens. And then you wish you would have done it or set the date. So that's one thing I've been trying to be extremely good about is just putting something in the calendar, getting something on. When people come to my mind, especially because I'm going to be traveling, I will reach out to them right when they're on my mind. Hey, I'm going to be in your area. Are you around to meet? Even if it's for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, just making that connection makes all the difference in the world.
And it's always better if you can be in person. I mean, I'm very thankful for Zoom, but to have that person sitting, a few feet away from you really is special.
Well, I agree. And I also think there's levels of communication. So I always say text messaging for me is like bottom of the barrel. That's my least favorite thing to do. And then it goes like text messaging, then it's a phone call, then it would be a Zoom call or like meeting, but then meeting in person would be the ultimate.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to take what you can get, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and you know how many times things get misinterpreted in text also, and sometimes even in phone calls because you can't see the person's expression.
Yes.
So things to be aware of.
Is there anything you wanted to add before we kind of wrap things up about our segment today?
Well, I came across a Facebook post this morning about pivoting. And, it says, anytime you feel negative emotions, stop and say, something is important here. Otherwise, I would not be feeling that negative emotion. What is it that I want? And I know you touched on that earlier, but, what is it that I need? What does my body need? What does my mind need? My emotions need? And then turn your attention to what you do want, not what you don't want. If you can blow up what you do want as big as you can blow up what you don't want, then we all win the gold medal, because that would
Yes.
take you to this fit place of, I am feeling so great now, so excited, so hopeful, as opposed to nobody loves me and I'm just going to sit over here by myself.
I also want to say one of the things I talked about under loneliness was sometimes it's you reaching out. It's you kind of putting, and I'm going to even take that one step farther because I think you can do things for yourself that you expect others to do for you. And maybe sometimes get a little angry if somebody doesn't do it. And I'm going to use what you told me before as an example. You sent yourself something when you opened your practice, and I'm going to tell you it's brilliant, and I would love it if you would share it.
I sent myself some silk flowers, and I wrote myself a note to come with those flowers that said,
It was when you were opening, tell the whole story.
Well, I was opening my very first office. I was in the basement of a local church. I was there for a few years, and it got me out, and I started, meeting with people and found out how much I loved what I was doing. And so, you're kind of unsure of things in your life and how this is going to go. So I wanted to psych myself up. So I wrote, "Congratulations on your new office and practice. Health, joy, and prosperity are yours. Your practice is amazing. Thank you for helping people remember who they really are." Because that was my goal. And I still have it after all these years. And that was probably 15 years ago.
Oh, that's such a true statement to every single thing, though, that we've been talking about is if you're going to get angry because somebody didn't send you flowers, what did you do for yourself? So you have to start taking action and you have to start taking responsibility for some of these things. And I thought that was a great example because that was brilliant. And that gave me such a great idea just to do for some future things for myself, because you should be your biggest cheerleader. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, it's even
But
when you get it in the mail, as opposed to just looking at what you wrote, but now it comes like, a week later and you're like, oh, look.
And if you're like me, I would forget that I sent it to myself. And then I'd be like, oh, it's from me. I forgot. But I really wanted to go back to the lie that says, if I feel it, it must be true, because that's what we've been talking about today. But the truth says the emotion is real, but the story that you've created behind it is not always the way that you've built it to be. And so one unanswered text that does not decide your worthiness or your wantability. That does not make you who you are. One closed door does not decide that you missed your chance or your opportunity is gone. And one hard season does not get to decide that God forgot about you. So when your feeling gets loud, I want you to remember to pause at the table and tell the whole truth and lead with love. Choose the higher purpose and open yourself back up to infinite possibilities about what's possible and what could happen for you. Bonita, thank you again for bringing your wisdom to this conversation and helping us see how these stories don't just stay in our minds. They can show up in our bodies, our choices, and the way we move through the world. So thank you.
Thank you, Joni.
And if today's conversation made you think of somebody who needs to hear this reminder, please send this episode to her. Subscribe to Big Talk at the Table wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit subscribe and leave a comment. Tell me what you're feeling and what's been the loudest for you lately, and what story are you ready to question? I'll also drop the Pause at the Table framework in the comments section on the YouTube channel, so you'll be able to grab it and download it from there. You can also join us inside the Hive community on Facebook, and I am on Facebook, Joni Leigh. Bonita is on Facebook also as
Soul Things by Bonita Jacque.
I knew I wouldn't get that right. That's why I had you say it. So remember, it's never too late to recognize the lie. It's never too late to choose the truth, and it's never too late to become the woman God created you to be. Thank you for pulling up a chair and spending time with us today. And I want you to make sure that you join us next week for episode 3, because we're going to be unveiling another lie that we tell ourselves, some of the biggest lies that we tell ourselves. So until next time, lead with love, believe in infinite possibilities. Remember, your emotions deserve a voice, but the truth gets the final word. And the biggest one, remember, you got this.